morning, ladies and gentlemen. I think it is 11 o'clock and it is probably time that we start. My name is Johan Berger, and it's my privilege and pleasure to welcome you to this seminar on the important topic of leadership in the UAE, hosted by the College of Business and Economics of the UAE. Sorry, I spoke about the leadership in the UAE and not the UAEU. It is part of the STEPS platform, which we have started. STEPS standing for Seminar and Talks on Executive Education and Postgraduate Studies, which is a platform that was created to address topics of relevance primarily for the UAE, but much broader than that. And today we are talking about the concept of leadership. Now, leadership is a much talked about topic. It has been so for ages, as a matter of fact. In more recent times, the topic has received more attention as societies and industries realize the importance of good or visionary leadership as the driver for success, whether that be for companies and whether that be for countries, civilizations, societies. In Singapore, we saw the impact of the legendary Lee Kuan Yew, who was credited for the success of transforming a third world country, basically a city-state, into a first world success story within one generation. The island has no natural resources on its 720 square kilometers, other than its strategic location and the intellect of its people, with a total population of about 5.6 million people. Another country with a remarkable success story is the one in which we find ourselves now, namely the United Arab Emirates, where His Highness Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan founded the UAE in 1971. The leadership of the UAE refused. Both these countries have remarkable infrastructure, great government processes, it's very safe and secure, crime very low. There's a vision in both of a great future that drives everybody in society. Both countries also embrace innovation and growth. This contrasts, unfortunately, against countries that do have rich resources, but that are examples of corruption and decay, where the focus is on personal enrichment and where politics is about fattening your own purse to the detriment of the population. So we will be discussing leadership in various forms and disguises in today's panel. Now, please allow me to introduce the panel members of today. You have their shortened bios on the flyer, so please feel free to get into more information when you look at the flyer. First of all, my top left corner, Dr. Thuraya Laban, Associate Professor and Director of the CBE off-campus site here in Abu Dhabi and the head of the MBA program. She's an academic and a strategist by nature, but with a lot of business and practical experience. Right at the bottom, Dr. Muhammad Al-Suwaidi, who is an assistant professor in leadership at the CBE, the College of Business and Economics. We have Dr. Willie Visser, dressed in blue, assistant professor in leadership at the CBE. And then we have Mrs. Charmaine Klima, who's a leadership expert at ADNOC, which is the national oil company in Abu Dhabi. So, ladies and gentlemen, once again, welcome to the panel. And thank you for your willingness to share your knowledge. I'm now talking to the panel people and experience with us. It is really much appreciated. The format of today will be one where I prepared a couple of questions to discuss with the panel members instead of having a presentation by each. Some of them have slides that they will share with the audience, but primarily it will be a kind of a fireside chat. You as the audience are welcome to ask questions as well. Please use the chat function for that. I will check on it and then relay your questions to the panel. So, on this note, without further ado, let us start. I would firstly like us to look at the issue of the definition of leadership and management. I see many people make a differentiation, and I don't always necessarily agree with what I read. So I have a panel now that can help me on the straight and the narrow. Now, some of these definitions define and describe the two concepts as clearly different, with leadership ascribed to everything that's good and management ascribed to everything which is bad. Now, I don't want to be a manager in this sense because managers are bad, leaders are great. But is this really the case? Can we have good managers without being good leaders? Leadership being a function, according to Henry Fayol, of management in its entirety. And can we have good leaders without being good managers? What are we then? Some authors actually combine the two, such as you look at the legendary Elliot Jacques, who spoke about managerial leadership, as do quite a few others. Ladies and gentlemen of the panel, your views. Enlighten us. Willie, please.
Yes, okay, Johan. Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, good. I think you've solved your own problem that you have stated by mentioning all of these scholars that look at leadership in a different way. Personally, I must say, if I look at if we start with looking what's the underlying meaning of managers, and the word of a manager is called manners, and which means hand. So managers have like a hand in their budgets, the forecasts, and things they do things, right? Whereas the underlying meaning of leadership is to go or to travel, to show the way, to lead, right? Now the thing is, some scholars have spent their whole lives on trying to make this proper distinction between the two. But personally, I believe it's an artificial distinction. I want you to show me a manager who's not leading in the sense of creating a vision for their team, whether it's on the first line management level or the middle management or the top management. You know, I think in various degrees, you find that some managers do leadership tasks the higher you go up in the organization, and then some managers do more managing tasks lower down in the organization. So, but I don't think we can make a distinction between these things. If you look at the functions of management, one of the functions of management is leading. And leading is all about, you know, motivating people, get them to work together to achieve an organizational goal. And if you look at the definitions of leadership, the most prominent definitions is to facilitate the collective effort of employees. So, yeah, so I hope you can see what I'm trying to say, you know, that the distinction is quite artificial. I think each and every manager or leader in an organization, doesn't matter on which level of the organization you are, need to be able to manage, in other words, to do certain things in an organization, but they also need to give a vision and lead people in a certain direction. That's my take on it in any case.
Great. Dr. Mohammed, as an academic in the sense, expert in leadership, your view?
Yes, I just also wanted to share my point of view. I guess even in the literature, you will find that they went beyond defining leadership as a role or a position within the structure of the organization. In fact, they're saying that any employee can be a leader in the organization, especially when they're leading themselves, and then also providing certain kind of energy and motivation where they can, or maybe sharing their vision with their managers in terms of where the department can go or where the organization can go. So by such sense, you would say that any employee can be a leader through exhibiting leadership behaviors rather than being in a leadership position. When it comes even to the scholars, you will find that some of them might, in the beginning of the leadership literature, they would define it in terms of traits only. So leaders are born to be leaders through certain kind of higher intelligence, higher emotional intelligence, certain kind of strength in their personality. But then you would find that even other scholars would disagree with them, where they focus more on behaviors, and they focus more on sometimes leadership might be a certain kind of situation. A certain individual might be a leader in a certain situation, but he might not exhibit leadership behaviors in other situations. So how can we define these different, let's say, elements that are part of the situation? How can then help and guide individuals to exhibit certain kind of leadership behaviors in these different situations?
Right.
Yes, Johan.
Please, sorry, I interrupted you.
I just wanted to mention later. I will discuss maybe when we talk about this trend perspective and how does that affect also the leadership literature in the current team. Yes, so that's all.
Right.
Yeah, I just want to add to what Mohammed has said there. I think one of the things, and I will talk a little bit about that later on as well. I think the one thing that is becoming very prominent in organizations now is what we call shared leadership. That is where everybody with the appropriate skills for the specific thing that you want to deal with come into play. So it's not just a designated leader must always have all the answers and everything like that. Shared leadership is where a person with the appropriate skills and the appropriate knowledge, automatically takes the leadership. But then it needs, you need a certain level of maturity for that, so that people other than the designated leader can stand back and say, listen, let us give this person the opportunity to lead.
Okay, thanks, Vili. Dr. Thuraiya, you have a point to make?
Yeah, I just want to a little bit add on what Dr. Mohammed say. It is true that leadership skills, anyone can be a leader, but I want to talk a little bit more from a practical side in the corporation. I think when we are in positions of leadership, I think leadership and management are required, are must. So you have to lead, and you have to know how also to manage. However, when you are in the management, if you are a manager in an organization, you need to know how to manage, but not necessarily we are expecting you to be a leader. It is good to have, but I think a manager is more expected to execute as per the leadership perspective. So this is a little bit from a practical side. So.
Thank you for that. Charmaine, you sitting in practice, you work with leaders on a daily basis in one of the largest organizations in the UAE, if not the largest. Your perspective, your views on this topic.
Yeah, thank you, Johan. It's interesting for me to hear the academic, theoretical, and Dr. Thuraiya's practical side. Because, as a practitioner, yes, we have to cover the theory and the academic side of leadership. And in an organization, what I tend to find is that a lot of people in the positions of leadership, and for us, we would define a leader as someone holding a title, so the title of manager and above, or team leader and above, is seen as a leader in the organization. And I think it's only natural that a lot of people, if they don't have the background or experience of having a good leader in their career, will ascribe going back to the point in your question, the more positive leadership traits and qualities to those that, to Dr. Thuraiya's point, that they see as a leadership position in the organization, and the more negative kind of traits to who they perceive to be in more of the managerial positions. However, I think it oversimplifies the complexities and the interdependencies of the two functions, irrespective of your position in the organization. Dr. Vili's point, anyone can be a leader. And if we're looking at concepts of shared leadership, for example, I would also say that still requires the right capabilities of the leader in order to enable shared leadership to emerge in the team, in the organization as well. So I don't want to oversimplify these things. However, from the organizational point of view, I do see people ascribing these more positive traits, such as setting the vision, engaging people's hearts and minds, driving people towards our achievements, ascribed to those that they perceive to be leaders, and more the performance management, resource allocation, time and attendance, the more negative so-called traits of managers ascribed to those that they see in a management position. So I think it's also important that we, as experts in the area of leadership and leadership development, it's part of our role to help people understand, irrespective of your position in the organization. I think you must embrace the positive qualities of leadership in your authentic style with the positive qualities and the requirements of managing in order to achieve organizational success, whatever your role is within that organization.
Thank you. I think that gives a very good perspective. And I think all four of you have actually now put in place the importance of both aspects and where and when and how we would actually find it. I would like to move on to a second question. I might come back later on because, Aman, you touched upon something which we typically refer to nature versus nurture. Are leaders born or are they made? And in itself, a debate for you know, a webinar on its own. But I would like to move on to something practical. In the UAE, I referred to just now in my introduction, as is in the case of Singapore, we've seen the countries being transformed into economic and social powerhouse with great strides being made in all those areas that I mentioned: infrastructure, social services, government services, growth, diversification, etc. Is this money talking or is it leadership? It is easy to do a lot when you have the money, but then to contrast that perspective, we've seen countries with very little natural resources becoming success stories like Singapore, but then we've also seen the countries with huge natural resources becoming economic and social disasters. We don't need to look very far for examples of this, but that's not the point. What I would like to know from you, if we look at countries like the UAE specifically and others like then the Singapore, etc., what are your thoughts on the contributing factors to the success of these countries? And leadership is a nice catch-all, but if you can be a bit more specific, I think the audience would appreciate something like that. Dr. Mohammed, you're Emirati.
Okay, so I guess maybe there are many different elements that help in, let's say, in the success of the UAE experience and growth. So one of them is the future foresight. You would see that even in Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid's autobiography, when he's describing his father and the vision of even before the establishment of the country, he was thinking of building free zones, Jabal Ali, which was even a little bit strange even for the people here. An area which is quite far, how would that help the economy? But from their future foresight, they knew that something is happening and there is a growth where they're expecting. Another idea that might be even that had helped in the growth of the country is that from the visions of Mohammed bin Rashid, he said that when he was trying to understand what's happening in the region, is it a leadership crisis? Is it a money talking, or is it are we facing a lack of resources? Let's say when we're talking about the Middle East, but then he says, no, it's not about we are rich with resources, we have good leaders, but the crisis is in management rather than leadership. How can we manage the different issues in the country in a very effective and in a very efficient way that will help in the growth of the country? So they had the awareness of the importance of managing things effectively, even since the beginning establishment of the country. So these 2 points: future foresight and effective management.
Good. Dr. Thray, you and Charmaine have been here for a decade plus, so you obviously have thoughts as well. You, in any case, had your hand raised. I saw it.
I think my remark is going to be very short, Johan. I think having a vision and having leaders who are able really to really implement their vision is very important. Money will help, of course, that's very important. But I think one of the most important thing is that vision talks to everyone, and everyone is behind that vision. I think that there's the unity of UAE nationals and the unity of even expats are embracing this vision and this future vision of what UAE should look like in the future. I think this is empowers people and give them like a motivation to act in the same direction to make that dream true. And I think this is it's a vision that talks, as we said, in communication is very important. It's a vision that talks to the heart and the mind, to everyone. So because everyone sees something for him in that vision, and everyone is contributing from his side to that vision. And I think this is why UAE is successful in implementing that vision.
It links kind of with Peter Singer's the fifth discipline, where he talks about shared vision, which is crucial for people. They embrace it. It's who they are. Charmaine, you have views?
Yeah, thank you. I would echo the sentiments of Dr. Threya and Dr. Mohammed. I think while I think it's a particularly in the UAE is a very good example of how visionary leadership can actually engage. So it's not just about having the vision and sharing the vision. The part of the skill that I see here is actually aligning the population around that vision and really engaging people in what that means for them, whether they were born, raised here, UAE national, expat, wherever you come from. And even as people visiting the country, you know, I just had the example of my parents being here from Australia. And even as a visitor to this country, they see the difference in how things are led here. Yes, money is a resource, but it's only a resource. And I think the real differentiating factor is how does that visionary leadership actually leverage the resource they have available, being the money, into bringing that vision to life and actually driving the alignment through the entire population today and tomorrow, because it's been going on for so long and we all know it will continue to go on, and that takes a lot of effort over an extended period of time that also has to be driven, leveraged, and engaged, and the momentum kept as well. So I think money alone will never do these things. It helps, but like with anything, it's a resource, and the leadership has that role of leveraging those resources in a good way as well.
Billy, you have a point to make? Dr. Mohammed, you have something to say?
Yes, I just also wanted to add an additional point or an example of how things are running in the country. Let's say when it comes even to future foresight, they will think of future challenges that the country might face, even let's say 50 years from now. So since 1990, the country entered into a discourse. What if the role of oil diminished in the economy? And what if the country has finished its exported the last barrel of oil? How would we survive? So since 1990, they were trying to diversify the, let's say, the different sources of income for the country, to the extent that Dubai, for example, reached to the oil would only represent 3% of its GDP. So they had a vision and they were working on it until they achieved amazing results, you know, within time.
I have two stories. Charmaine, you spoke about the expats. People embrace their lives here. They look at what they get and they buy into, embrace, not really buy into, they embrace the vision of a future. I had a group from South Africa here 2 years ago that were an executive development program, and I was gushing about what's going on in the UAE. And the one lady looked at me and said, "Johan, you're not coming back, are you?" I say, well, it will be with difficulty. You know, your country is your country, but when things work as well as yes, they do. And another story I would like to share in this regard is that I spoke to a person, also an expat, but he's been here for quite a number of years, a couple of decades. And he told the story, whether it's true or not, I don't know, but it's such a nice story, I'm going to share it in any case, as where with the expo, before the expo, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid took a group of people to a certain spot, and he says, see the area here? It's such and such a date in future. I will cut the ribbon to start the expo, make it work. And he left them. And later on, the one person went to the chief project officer, one of the contractors, and he says, you need to talk to Sheikh Mohammed. So we're not going to be able to do this. And he looked at him, the project manager looked at the guy and said, you talk to Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid. He's given us the goal, he's given us an objective, we need to make it work. And I think that explains a lot about the nature of the leadership that we do find here. I'm going to move on to the third bit. I've such a nice discussion, but we're going to run out of time for the questions. I would like to address something which I think is something that I see developing at great speed in the UAE, and that is the rise of Emirati women in leadership positions, and not only in industry per se, but in highly technical organizations such as TII, Technology Innovation Institute, which is part of the Advanced Technology Research Council in Abu Dhabi, but then also in supranational organizations such as the UN. In the UN, both in the UAE, both in the federal and in the cabinets of the Emirates, various Emirates, and then, as I said, in local and international organizations. The number of women with postgraduate degrees in both the soft and hard sciences are also increasing at a huge rate. Is this a deliberate strategy of the UAE government, or is it a natural phenomenon due to Emirati women saying, these are the opportunities that are available for us, we will embrace them and make them our own? Over to you.
Well, you can say it's both. There is a strategy where they empower the Emirati women in different areas. In fact, even since the establishment of the country, when the education system was provided, we didn't have any challenges of, let's say, having women continuing even their higher education in many advanced fields. So this was, and you can say, since even some of it might be even before. I remember my mother was traveling to a different country when she was finishing her higher education. So it was done, you can say, in the beginning of the 70s. The other issue is that as a result of a deliberate strategy where they would empower Emirati women in many different areas, now you have, even when they would hold very sensitive positions. We had maybe in the end of 90s, we had the first female minister in the country, and she was holding, when it comes to international trade of the country, which was a very huge project, and she's still available here, and she can even discuss and talk about her experience. It's not only that, even then later you would find they would provide her with more empowerment when it comes to representing the population in the national parliament, to the extent that they said, no, we need to have now a 50-50 quota. 50% of the parliament would be men and 50% would be women. So the country is providing certain kind of opportunities. They're providing resources, and then as a result of that, you will find many Emirati women who would excel in many different areas, and even have much better performance, let's say, in comparison to men.
Yeah. I would agree, if I may. I definitely, I mean, for me personally, I love getting our female leaders together in a room. You know, I think this country has done exactly as you said. There's been a vision, there's been a deliberate strategy to ensure equal opportunity for all. And I think that deliberate strategy has allowed opportunities to open, which I see the drive, I see the passion, I see the willingness of the female Emiratis to take. Whether the opportunity is there or not, it really requires the right ambition, the right attitude, and the right willingness to embrace it and do something with it. And I really see that passion, excitement, and drive coming through in our Emirati female leaders. And then I see them creating additional opportunities for those that will follow in their footsteps, not just for our Emirati women, but also our male colleagues as well, you know. And I think that the deliberate strategy and the ambition and drive of the Emirati women to take that and excel in the leadership positions with the right support structures in place to help them do that, then creates a self-sustaining cycle where they pave the road for others. And many of these women do have technical degrees and postgraduate degrees, and then they may find themselves in such high demand, they have the opportunity to move elsewhere and kind of free up and allow others to follow in their footsteps as well.
I just wanted to provide two additional examples of how the country is providing certain opportunities for the Emirati women. One of them is that now there is a regulation that all boards should have youth in them. So you would find, and it was a part of the university's board for a certain period of time. And we had also a female student from a different university. She was part of the board, and she was expressing her ideas, her ambitions, maybe the ambitions of her generation. The other example is that, you know, let's say the space industry, you would find now when it comes to the training, they provided training not only for the men. We do have also a female astronaut who is being developed to be one of the, you can say, the first female Arab astronaut in the region. So they provide, the country is trying to even design certain kind of opportunities where they can empower the Emirati in these areas, different areas.
That's wonderful to hear. Dr.
Well, I'm sorry, I took.
No, that's fine. I just want to second Charmaine and Mohammed on what they were saying, and that this reflects a little bit the foresight thinking of the leadership. We just need to look a little bit to the demographics. So if we look a little bit to the UAE national demographic, I mean, half of the population is composed of women, and that's why this is a deliberate strategy in order to involve women in leading the country. Otherwise, UAE would not have achieved all this success without the half of the population. And this deliberate strategy is reflected through government initiatives and policies where they are enhancing gender equality and women inclusion in leadership, accessibility also to education. If you look a little bit to the demographics in the universities in general, like UAEU, the majority of our students are female. If you look a little bit to Masdar University, like around 60% of the Emirati graduates are women, I think. Corporations also are enhancing female recruitment through and giving them realizing the capabilities and the positive contribution of women in the corporate culture. So yes, it is a deliberate strategy reflecting really the leadership and the foresight thinking of UAE leaders.
Right. Billy, please.
Very quickly, I have a very brief comment to make. I actually saw it in real life. I had the opportunity to teach about 23 Emirati students on leadership, but they were all engineers. The majority of the class was women. And they absolutely excelled. The drive that they have, I think they see that there's a lot of opportunities in the country for them as a woman and a leader, as you know, but they have this internal drive to prove themselves or to learn. They're inquisitive, they're curious about, and they want to excel. And it was tangible to see them succeed and perform way better than the male companions. So it's just something practical I saw. But there's a huge
we'll not go into that. Something which is actually adjacent to that, we have seen a lot of being said about culture in organizations and the role of leaders in developing and empowering culture within organizations and countries. And then obviously one of those is we talk about the issue of diversity of cultures. The UAE actually has a Ministry of Tolerance and Coexistence. I would like to hear your thoughts on the impact of culture and the role of leaders within the ambit of culture as an empowering factor. Do cultural nuances play a role in shaping how leadership is perceived and practiced? Your views, Willie.
Yeah, this is one of my pet subjects, and this is the influence of culture, national culture, on leadership capabilities. If I look at leadership as an influencing process, there's various things that help you to influence other people. The one is your traits, your personality, for instance, the way you deal with people. Some of your competence and skills come into play, but then there's another factor called your cultural, inheritance. It's your cultural values, your cultural upbringing. There's a different, they talk about a cultural programming process that happens. It's like you go to school, you go to university, there you pick up, but it's all bound within a cultural context, and that comes through in your leadership style, it's like an unconscious process. And the thing is, what I think is we know very little about the cultural influence in the UAE and the national culture, and how does it influence the leadership of the country, and also leadership within organizations. And this brings me to my other pet subject, and that is, all Western models, which is like US and UK based research and Eurocentric and Western cultural value systems, is it applicable for UAE leadership? That's a big question, and we don't really have an answer for it. Although I think we are a culture in transition, moving from traditional culture values to a more modernized cultural values. But what's the role that our national culture play in the display of our leadership? And I think we don't have an answer for that. And I think that is something we seriously should look into and try to understand. But that's just my take on the influence of culture on leadership. I think it plays a definite role. Do we know how it influenced leadership? No, we don't, because we haven't studied it yet. That's my beginning.
If I may,
Please, please.
I would say maybe from an academic point of view, but I would also say that in my experience, I would say that we do know a lot about how the national cultures are translated through leaders here in the everyday, in how they show up. Me, myself, coming from Australia, which has a completely different culture, and even a military background myself as well. I was an officer in the military for a period of time. I think if you have the culture that you allow, I would say, to influence you, the culture that you're aware of influencing you as a leader, plays a big role in how you show up, whether it's as an Emirati leader or a generalized Western leader. I think there's a lot to be said for being aware of it as the first foundation, because how you show up influences those who are immediately around you, and has a ripple effect there, which is how culture is developed really in a practical sense. It's how you show up every day as a leader defines in the minds of those around you what the culture actually is, what's acceptable, what's not, how things are done, etc., etc. And I think that, again, simplifying it between, I think in the end we're human. And yes, our culture has a definite impact, but not just on how we show up as leaders, and how we then impact the culture that creates, but also how we show up as people within the context of a culture. And I can tell you that the context of the culture I was in the Australian military versus the Australian workforce versus the UAE industry it's different in all time at everywhere you go. And I think to be an effective leader within that context, you need to be in a position to understand what that culture is, understand the culture that you're creating within the context of the organization, because it exists on so many levels, and then realizing what is working very well, and you as an individual adapting the culture that you create within that sphere as well, irrespective of your nationality or upbringing or exposure to different cultures. So again, culture and behaviors and things for me is kind of very, very interesting and close to my heart. So there's definitely space for understanding it from an academic point of view, though I truly believe, and I think that would give us a lot more insight into some of the more relevant differences and unique capabilities that an Emirati leadership cultural model would bring to how everybody functions within this UAE.
On that note, Charmaine, what you then are telling me is that, and this is how I understood you, that if I know you're Australian, you're in the military, I can expect the following leadership style. Or is that too far?
Yeah. I think it's up to you as the leader to make sure that people don't see you in that way, if that makes sense. I think if that's the way you want to come across and the culture you want to create, then that's one thing. But I think you need to be aware that people may perceive you that way and make a judgment call as a leader as to whether that culture and whether that view and whether your behaviors are in line with what's going to get the best results from people there. Does that make sense?
Right. But in other words, then understanding the culture does not necessarily give me a predetermined answer to the expected leadership style, because I have the freedom of choice. I can then go and say, right, this is how it is. Dr. Threya.
I think it would simplify it too much if we then say an Emirati leader looks like this, where there's so much diversity within what that is. However, there's some common threads that have arisen through the culture, I would say, that are relevant for you to know in order to understand it a bit better.
Broad expectations, typically associated with Hofstede's national culture, whereas this would typically be on these dimensions, what an Emirati looks like, what Australian looks like, whatever. Those are typical, but not necessarily determined. Willie, you wanted to add?
Yeah, no, I just want to agree with Charmaine. You know, the thing is about self-awareness. Am I aware of my national culture and how it might influence my leadership style? Right. So, do I know, how do I influence it? You know, there's some local scholars who are serious when they question Western models and the applicability of Western models for, like, Emirati leadership. You know, I've read that, and it's not just a theoretical question. It's actually a practical question, because it's going to manifest in the workplace. I'm gonna, but now, and this is the other thing that Charmaine said that is very pertinent, and that is Emirati leaders is not only managing Emiratis. They by and large, they also are leading a lot of expats. So they have to have these dual capabilities. You know, maybe I need to work with my own Emirati employees in one way and with expats in another way, or maybe we need to find a model that is, you know, in terms of leadership, that will help me to influence anybody that's working. So I need to be, so one of the things that of the current workplaces here, we are culturally diverse. That's it. My previous workplace, there were 65 different nationalities working there. If you don't have some form of cultural intelligence or cultural awareness, and how do I need to adapt my leadership style to all of these different nationalities working with me, you're gonna get difficulty. You're gonna have trouble. Now, just worldwide, what's happening is, like in China, Southeast Asia, all of them are starting to develop their own unique leadership styles and competency models because they believe that it's different from Western, the typical Western theoretical models and leadership models. So I'm just saying it's not just a thing that's happening over here. Worldwide, different cultures are looking at understanding their own leadership models. Okay, that's it.
Good. Dr. Thuraya, you wanted to say something?
No, you know, with Johan, we had like a short chat about culture and leadership. And I mean, from what I observe, anyway, I think I agree with you that culture may influence our leadership style or leadership behavior. So the successful leaders are those who are able either to embrace that culture and see how in order to lead people, or to influence that culture also in order to influence people, either embrace it or influence it, depending on the context. The most important things, how successful you would be once, you know, you adapt, you embrace or you influence the culture. But I don't, from the other side is there a culture that enhances the people's ability to become leaders? I don't think on that, because I think, as Dr. Mohammed said, everyone is able to become a leader independently from any culture. The moment you believe in something, the moment you are motivated to achieve something, everyone can be a leader independently from the culture or the corporate culture he or she is in. So this is my own point of view. So,
okay, Willie, you referred, Dr. Mohammed, do you have a point today?
Yes, I just also wanted to add another point. When you've mentioned the influence of the culture, and then also the country has the Ministry of Tolerance, I would say that, yeah, as an Emirati, we are highly influenced by the, let's say, the Bedouin Arab culture, and Islam has also high influence in our culture. But not only that, we can see it from a historic perspective and even from geographic perspective. And most of the people here in the UAE, 100 years back, most of them are living in the seashore, and usually in the seashore areas, you will be dealing with a lot of strangers, and there are ships going back and forth. Not only that, if you would see it also from a historic perspective, the trade from, let's say, from China, India to Persia, and even in the Arab countries to Europe, this line is quite popular, and we are not, let's say, dealing with foreigners is not something new. It's not only since 30, 40 years. You can say 100 years back. That's why maybe the idea of tolerance is not foreign in our culture. You know, we have it. Maybe the geography had enforced it, the history had enforced it, and we have adopted it even with time.
Thank you.
Well,
sorry, Willie.
No, I just wanted to say that that's a good point, Dr. Mohammed. Thank you.
Willie, you referred to it, and I think so also, Charmaine. And we've had a question. We are using, and it's one of the questions in any case I have scheduled for later on, but let's address it now because we're talking about this. The question that came through from the audience is, we are using predominantly Anglo-American or Western European perspectives on leadership and management. To what degree do you feel we should be competent as educators and trainers in leadership models based on Gulf Arab, based on the issue of tribalism and Bedouin nomadism and Islamic perspectives? Is there a difference? Are we looking at a different application of the same principles? Are we looking at different principles? What is it that we're looking at here? Because, Willie, you made the point, it's one of your pet topics, is now the development of a Emirati leadership model or an Arab leadership model, either or, versus a dominant Western-oriented leadership model, which is not necessarily always embraced. If you look at a guy like Arnold Mandel, He used the Western psychological models of Carl Gustav Jung, and he complemented that with North American shamans, Central America, African witch doctors, and also the people and the philosophies of the East. Coming up with something unique. Do we have something similar that we need to look at, which is unique to the UAE or to the Middle East? Is there something that we can grow and develop that will become encompassing for everybody in the world? How do you see this?
I can just talk from experience. I had the privilege to work a little bit for a neighboring country where they use a typical assessment center to assess the leadership capabilities of the middle managers, which was extensive, right? And it didn't work. So already there, I started questioning the applicability of using those kind of techniques and technology to assess leaders, right? So for me, and then I had the opportunity to work in Abu Dhabi, and I saw definite differences, and this is based on practice because I've been in practice for my whole life, right? There's different approaches to leadership from the Emirati leaders in the organization, as well as some of the Western leaders. And sometimes the Emirati leaders, in private conversations, they felt that this Western leaders in the company is actually undermining them in a certain sense, So they feel that they have a way of leading which they would like to explore and put into practice. So really, personally, I think there's an opportunity to start to understand, maybe not so narrowly like a Emirati leadership model, but maybe a Middle Eastern leadership model, because there might be. But the reason why I mentioned, for instance, the Asian leadership models, East and South Asia, there's many different cultures, even in those groupings. And they believe that some of those cultures need a distinct leadership style that will work for their own people. But now, once again, I come back to the fact that here in the UAE, we're managing both our Emirati employees as well as expats. So it's a combination, I believe,
Okay. Dr. Mohammed, you're an Emirati. Do you agree with what Dr. Vali says?
Well, it would be interesting if, let's say, if the model was built from scratch from the indigenous the culture of UAE, then we might this might lead to a different perspective. But however, in the leadership literature, you would find that in the beginning they were developing these different frameworks, and then they wanted to know to what extent these different models are applicable in many other cultures. Yeah. So now the cross-cultural studies being initiated. I can even refer you to, let's say, 3 different studies. One which is by Greathoffs, which is the quite popular one, The Software of the Mind. It's a very popular book. The other study was done by the Globe Model of Leadership by Robert House from University of Pennsylvania, and he tried to measure different, let's say, variables, cultural variables that has high influence in leadership in many different nations. Part of them were also here in the GCC. There is also another study where they tried to identify different values that lead to certain kind of actions, okay? And those values are, like, let's say, the shared values among many different cultures, many different religions, and they've studied, let's say, when it comes to Islam, Christianism, Judaism, Buddha, and even when it comes to culture, the Roman, the Islam era here also. And they ended up with another model which is called the Values in Action, VIA, which is done by Martin Seligman and Peterson, and which is quite interesting. It might not provide you with a definition of let's say, Emirati leadership. However, it might guide you with maybe the certain kind of values that affect leaders here in the country.
Okay. Charmaine, I'm going to put you on the spot. You work for a national huge organization where you have a combination of Emiratis and expat, a lot of them would be Western. Your views on that? Do you see a stark difference there? Are there differences in approaches? Or do you have a strong organizational culture that determines the leadership style, that drives, that gives stature to the leadership style?
I think, you know, in experience, one of the if we look at the cultural dimensions, one of the largest, I would say, differentiating factors in terms of leadership style is the individualism versus collectivism, which here in the UAE is quite collective, whereas in a lot of westernized countries, it's seen as being more individual. So I think that has a high influence on how I see, as a Western expat, how I see one of the core differences, I would say, that I noticed is around the collaborative approach to decision-making, input, etc., versus a more individualistic kind of approach that can be quite, again, we're talking typical, you know, and there's always differences there. I think with understanding breeds more tolerance and the ability for people to operate better with diversity of leaders that we have there. Like you said, you know, Billy, he said 69, you know, different nationalities. We have 80 plus. So I think we have almost 100% of the world's cultures and nationalities represented here in our organization. And so understanding breeds tolerance, and it helps people to work well together. So I think if there is research into, you know, as Dr. Mohammed was saying, and really into maybe what are some of the cultural drivers that are showing up in our Emirati colleagues that are maybe different to our Asian colleagues or our African colleagues or our Western colleagues, you know, it helps us all integrate and understand each other better and work well within that, because, you know, organizations like ours are very strongly focused on supporting the nation, and that means supporting our national leaders as well. So you as a leader need to be able to work well within that population and help and understand those differences. And if you want to influence as a leader, you need to understand who you're influencing. So any kind of research into this area will help. And whether it's an Emirati leadership model or a GCC or an Arab leadership model, I think will evolve over time, because each nation within those, they're not really one group. Each nation within those has a different history, society, and relevance that also affects themselves as a national culture and people. So, but any additional research into that, I think, would be very helpful in helping that understanding.
I think that is something that Billy is smiling broadly about, because as you mentioned, that his pet topic now is looking at Emirati, Arab versus a Western leadership model. On that note, you know, I mentioned earlier on Elliot Jacques as one of the legendary leadership gurus of the past, and other leadership and culture gurus that come to mind include the likes of Manfred Ketz de Vries, Warren Bennis, Noel Tishy, Koos and Pasner, Jim Collins, Geert Hofstede, Von Strompenaars, and so one can go on. This is by no means an exhaustive list of people that I've mentioned. But who are the new kids on the block? Who are the new leadership gurus that we need to take cognizance of, that we need to understand in order to better empower ourselves for our roles as a leader within organizations?
Yeah, sure.
Hey.
You know, there's three in particular that I would probably mention. You know, Simon Sinek is someone who typically resonates well with our audience. And, you know, as someone in leadership development and someone with a coaching kind of a drive as well, starting with the why, which is one of his main, you know, one of his more popular, I guess, ideas and concepts, is really important, particularly for visionary leadership and engaging people and driving people to where you want to go. Brene Brown, I think, brings an interesting perspective as well. She kind of embraces the whole vulnerability, courage, and empathy side of leadership that a lot of people in the past may have dismissed or seen as more of a weakness in a leader rather than a strength. So I think bringing the I guess, empathy, courage, and vulnerability of a leader to the fore is something that I appreciate from her work. And again, Marshall Goldsmith as one of the kind of, if you want to think of him as a guru in leadership development, with his coaching and his constant belief that, you know, what got you here won't get you there, and being able to adapt that mentality of constant learning, constant development, growth, self-awareness, and accountability. I think those three would be three that I would refer to as kind of modernist influences.
Willie, anything from your side?
Yeah, just briefly, Johan, I think there's a couple of new trends in the field of leadership development. And the one is that I think it's also very relevant in this country, and that is inclusive leadership. Because of the known fact that we are dealing with diverse nationalities working for us in an organization, I think inclusive leadership means it's a style of leadership which is much more inclusive. It creates a safe space for people to voice. And I think specifically, Charmaine, in your area, you know, where occupational safety is such a tremendous emphasis, or has a tremendous emphasis, is you want people who speak up when they see problems that might endanger the safety. But the thing is that driving that voice is psychological safety, and driving that is inclusive leadership. So I've tested these relationships in a huge company back in South Africa, and it's very, very important, those three components. So that's the one thing. Then the other thing is, Johan, and I don't have time to go into this now, but it's how do companies deal with the complexity? And on the one side, they need to like, you know, focus on the operations and make that as efficient as possible. And on the other side, they need to innovate in a very complex world. So they need to stay competitive. So how do you get one person, one leader, to actually focus at the one optimizing the organization, but also innovating on the other side? And that poses a big kind of difficulty for most leaders. Now, there's models coming out to deal with that, because innovation is becoming very big in all organizations. So the first leadership model, they talk about ambidextrous leaders. They can do both, but it's probably not succeeding that well. Then you got what we call versatility index, you know, which shows managers where's their preference. Is it towards stabilizing the organization and the operations, or is it towards you know, innovation and so on? But if you have both of these, you need to create a space in your organization where innovation can happen, as well as focusing on the operations of the organization. So those are the new things. And then the last thing that I wanted to say is another way in which companies are dealing with it is co-CEO-ship. They have more than one CEO. So the one CEO looks at the operations, the other CEO looks, for instance, at innovation. But they have equal authority within the organization. And you would be surprised how many modern organizations is making use of that. And then the last trend that I see is creating a coaching culture within organizations, where coaching is becoming like a management style within an organization. But, okay, so I know we run out of time. That's all I'm
But Billy, just a question. You spoke about complexity.
Yes.
And earlier, Jacques defined these and he stratified systems theory. He spoke about the various levels, and each level associated with a number of years that you can deal with the complexity you can deal associated with the number of years going forward, up to level 7. And not everybody are level 7 people. Very few are looking at 22 or 25 to 50 years going forward, whereas levels 1 and 2 are at a very low operational level. So that is still relevant, with other words?
Well, you talk about complexity.
So
Elliot Jacques and his theory is one of the most complex leadership theories that you can get. Okay, and they assess leaders based on that complexity, and they assess you, in what way can you make decisions that will have an immediate influence 3 years later or 7 years later maximum. So they assess you that. I know you are a fan of Elliot Jacques and his leadership theories. I'm not so sure that I share your enthusiasm for Elliot Jacques. It's a what I'm saying, it's a very interesting theory, and it's cognitive challenging to understand the theory, but in terms of its practicality in organizations, that's where I have a little problem with, So
you're off my Christmas shopping list, my Christmas card list. You're not on that anymore. Dr. Mohammed, no, I'm teasing, obviously. Dr. Mohammed, I know you're a strong proponent and supporter of the strengths theory, where you spend less time on worrying about your weaknesses, but that you focus on your strengths, you determine it, and you spend 75% of your time focusing on that at which you're good at, instead of trying to spend most of your time raising your weaknesses. Could you explain a bit about? I know it's the Gallup leadership model, the Strengths Finder. If you can just give us a very short perspective, your perspective on this, I would appreciate it.
Yes, so I just wanted so when it comes to the strength perspective towards leadership, it answers a very basic question. What is the role of the organization? What is the role of the leader? Is it only about innovation and performance? They are shedding light into how can we add, let's say, create a certain kind of model, or a framework that ensures that employees and leaders would excel in their performance, in addition to enhancing the well-being of the employees and the leaders. So it's not only about performance and innovation. Well-being is very important part of it. And here comes, let's say, the strength perspective. And they found that through many different studies, when individuals focus and use their strength in their work, even for it was like a longitudinal study for 3 and 6 months, they found that there's also a very significant, strong relationship with, let's say, better well-being, less stress, higher self-esteem. So you're not only viewing the organization from a performance and profit perspective, you're viewing it as a social entity. It has a role not only for the society, where it can act positively, but also towards its employees. How can they, to ensure that they perform well and they would lead to profitable performance, but at the same time, they are not burning, let's say, like a candle that burns from both sides to reach the burnout status. So that's why the well-being is very important. And that's why maybe I wanted to add maybe Martin Seligman and his group as the new kids on the block when it comes to leadership literature. In addition to Brené Brown, I wanted also to mention Brené Brown also as an influential one also.
Dr. Mohammed, the strengths finders, Willie at one stage referred to the question of team leadership. So when you put together then your team, you need to make sure that you understand the strengths of each person that is in the leadership team to avoid overlap and to avoid gaps. Would I be saying that?
Yes, see what's interesting also with this strength perspective when it comes to leadership and managing teams is that it does not provide you with a prescriptive kind of behavior, or it doesn't have a very mechanistic view towards leadership. For example, if you want to be an effective leader, then you need to be 1, 2, 3, and 4, follow these steps and you'll be an effective leader. No, It provides a totally different perspective. It says that the leader needs to be aware of the strength of his team, and then how can he utilize these different resources so that the whole team perform highly. So the same leader would have a different leadership style with a different mix of team members. And this is what is interesting in such kind of model. It's much more organic. It's much more, you can say, it has a situational perspective, a little bit subtle, but it doesn't provide you with, let's say, a very kind of full detailed steps. If you ensure these, then you will be an effective leader. That's what's interesting in this model.
Okay. Shemaine, I'm going to put you on the spot now. When I started in the world of executive education 25 odd years ago, business schools were there in automobile. We would go into the company and we would tell them, this is what you need. And they believed it. And they were so grateful for you using your time to come and tell them what it is that they needed. That world has changed in totality. Today, you have the corporates, large businesses, developing their own leadership institutions, academies, if you want to call it, and they are much more focused on doing things themselves. They do buy in skills as and when they need it. What drives this move towards in-house education and training, and where you do source external competence? What is it that you look at? When you were to approach a business school, do you look at brand? Do you look at competence that is frequently associated with brand? Do you look at cost? Do you look at the various, do you have a differentiation, for example, where you would like and say, great, the senior guys we send to Harvard, we will trust local universities with the lower levels of our employees and our managers. Is it as simple as that? If not, what is it that you look at, and why the move? Why don't you trust us?
Well, I wouldn't say it's an issue of trust.
I'm teasing.
Yeah, of course. Look, I've been an internal leadership development center of excellence leader for many years. So I've experienced the first that you said, okay, the organization just says, go and bring us the Harvards of the world. And then I've been through cycles where they say, we have everything we need in here. We have everything we need. Don't go spending money on these other guys. What are they going to give us that we can't give ourselves? And I think part of that might have been driven through bad experiences with some of these partnerships. And when I say bad experience, I don't mean the business school turned up and did a bad job. What I mean is a lot of the feedback that I hear from participants when we do bring the external vendors, and I've heard over the years, is where's the local relevance? Where's the case studies that are in this, from this region? Where's the case studies that are from this industry? Where's the case studies that have been developed in the last 3 years, 5 years, not these old kind of case studies? So the focus then shifts to, why don't we do it ourselves? We have the capability, we have people in the organization. I know what good looks like through my experience and working with very reputable business schools from around the world. And I then become, myself and my team become relied upon for determining what good looks like. And part of that comes down to sometimes level. Who is my audience for this particular need? But to be perfectly honest with you, the driving force for anyone who's inside of an organization looking for development solutions is, what is the exact need of this specific population, and who is the best placed, or what is the best placed solution for this? Is it an internal solution? Is it an external solution? Is it a combination of both? And if it is an external solution, such as partnering with a business school, is reputation important in this instance or not? Is leading research in one particular area important for this need or not? How easy is it? And honestly, myself, how easy is it for me to deal with this institution? If an institution, irrespective of who they are as a brand, comes to me with a view of, well, you need us, we don't need you. To me, as a practitioner, I don't know that that's going to give my audience the best solution. I don't know that I can work effectively with a partner like that, because I do use the word partner, because in my experience, I find partnering with external vendors really produces the best result. So when I find these business schools, institutions that aren't even business schools, whoever they may be, if I feel that they have the expertise, obviously, and the correct, and people who show up on the day will be respectful and recognize that the person at the front of the room is someone that they can listen to, then how willing are they to adapt what they think is a good solution to what our organization actually needs as a good solution? And much of that is driven by our personal context. So hence the customization piece is very important. And I've seen some institutions say, sure, we'll customize this for you, but I know it's not being customized. So they need to be willing to come to the table with whatever the requirements are. And we also need to be willing to understand what is possible. Is this asking too much? Is it not? And really recognizing the value, I think, that working with academia can bring into our organization. And I think when you find institutions that also recognize the value of working with industry and what that brings to their research and their other practice, I think that's where you find a really good partnership. And I think the value that both bring to the equation. And honestly, I also really appreciate institutions that work with other businesses around the world and are able to bring a different perspective. I really enjoy getting a different perspective, and I look for not just the expertise, but what can you bring me that's different to what I could do myself, or what my team could do, or that somebody else at a different price point could do from you, you know? So I wouldn't say there's a one size fits all. Different strokes for different folks, different needs, but it is all driven by the organization's need and how can we guarantee return and demonstrate it to the people that we have to answer to based on the partnership as well.
No, thank you. That's very valuable insight. It provides a lot of food for thought. Thoraya, you've been involved with executive education and postgrad education, working with corporates for quite a long period of time. Your views on that? Do you share more or less the same views as Charmaine?
Yes, I agree with Charmaine in the sense that corporates or organizations are all the time looking for relevance, and relevance means also looking to the practical side, to the corporate world, the details and the knowledge of the corporate world. The problem is that institutions, and it's not only the case of our university, institutions here in UAE and worldwide, they are moving towards more very academic, mainly when I talk about business school, because of a competition, because of academic research, and we are starting a little bit losing that connection, you know, with the practical side in the organization base, because there is lack of relationship, with a lack of consultancy and this kind of things. So that's why also the corporations that move to internal, recreating internal department for to develop their own skill. And I think how can I say that? It's for a business school in general, this is my point of view. I think they are there to serve to serve businesses, and I think losing that connection is really a high risk for business schools. So this is a call to all business schools really to reconnect, you know, with the industry by by also engaging faculty members in real projects, real activities within the corporate work, which is a little bit hard because also the faculty members, they have other liabilities when it comes to teaching, when it comes to research, and finding the balance. It's very difficult, and the risk is that these institutions, they will lose relevance, if I would say. So, yeah.
I think in a very real sense, this is a wake-up call. Charmaine's words, the thoughts are a wake-up call for business schools globally to wake up to the thought that corporates know what they want and what they don't want, and they know where to get what they want. And either you play the game or you will become irrelevant. I have a final question then for Thuraya and for Willie. If I may be so pertinent, and Dr. Mohammed, you're welcome to chip in, and that is our new MBA is part and parcel, rather, we have a leadership program, which is part and parcel of our MBA. What makes it so unique? Why both the leadership as well as the MBA per se? Why should I, as a prospective student, choose your MBA as the MBA of choice? Why not someone else? Why specifically yours, or ours for that matter?
I just want to give a little bit of background about how we, designed this new MBA program. So, in fact, when I came to this part of the world, and when I looked to all the MBA programs here within not only in UAE but in the region, I noticed that there is no requirement in terms of work experience. And I was a little bit surprised that for the MBA program, there is no requirement from that perspective, because an MBA program is really for people who have a certain professional experience, and they would like to add that layer of academic and connecting to the practical side in order to aspire for a promotion, or to either to shift also career. So this is the purpose of an MBA program. And when we look to the content to all the MBA's program within the region, also they are all similar, okay, in terms of content, in terms of courses, and this kind of thing. So anyway, any MBA program, when it is designed, it has to respond to the needs of organizations and business in general. And in that process, we interviewed maybe more than 150 organizations in the UAE, public, private, large, small organizations, service from different industries. And as Dr. Mohammed said, the strategic foresight came as an important skill that an MBA program should develop. But the second one, and was where they were very interrelated, is leadership. Because you cannot have a strategy if you are not able to implement it, okay, and to lead people in order to implement that strategy and to influence people. So leadership came as a requirement. But we said, okay, they need leaders, but giving a standard course of leadership where there is only theory is not gonna respond to the requirement of the business. People, they need people who are really having like basics, of leadership. They know what is leadership. They know how they remember their own leadership style, their difficulties or strengths. If we wish, at least we need to prepare them, and it's something that when they graduate from the MBA program, they can value, or it can be a key selling point for these students. So this is how we wanted to. This is why leadership is one important component of the new MBA program. And as you know, it's not like a standard course. It's a program. We call it the leadership program. That runs throughout the entire duration of the MBA program, with the practical content, where the students, in terms of content, if I would say, or model, it's usually like similar to, you can find even in corporation, where the students, they have to understand themselves, then see how they can lead themselves in the group, and then in an organization, and then in the community, if I would say. So why this program is important and how it makes us different is really by giving that practical side of leadership skills. Why it could be an added value even for organizations like Charmaine organization is that at least we prepare them that these big organizations who are able to afford internal development department to build on that, okay, not to start from scratch. But at the same time, and we know that the leadership here, they are encouraging also the shift of Emirati to private sector, to entrepreneurship. And this is all these in private sector, most of the organizations are not that large, or they don't have the resources to have their own leadership program. And I think this is an added value also for the students, either to be because we know as a lot of research there are stereotypes about locals and going to the private sector. You understand what I mean? And having that leadership component will give them an added value to start within the private sector, or even also to engage in entrepreneurial activities. So this is a little bit why, if I was like the key selling point of our MBA program.
Billy, from your side, you're the professor that will be ultimately responsible for implementing this leadership program.
Yeah, I think
in collaboration with Dr. Mohammed too.
Yeah.
I think Dr. Thuraya said it very well. I think we are in the process of preparing people to take up leadership roles. So it's a very practical based process, leadership development process, where people learn the skills and the competencies of actually implementing leadership when they get into a business. Obviously, it's based on best practices in other, we will do the same as other business schools, but the focus would be on preparing you to take up a leadership position or role when you are done over here. So, for example, we would, we talked about coaching skills just now and creating a coaching culture within your organization. We would give you a full coaching program so that you as a leader can become a leader as coach, where your coaching styles become, or coaching becomes part of your management style. Also what Dr. Thuraya said, where other business schools will focus on perhaps a semester of leadership development or leadership, we go further. We're going to take it for a year and a half, where this is an immersion in leadership for a year and a half. And then eventually, I think what will distinguish us eventually over time is our understanding and research that we're going to do on Emirati leadership. I think that once we understand Emirati leadership, and I think Dr. Mohammed referred to it, we want to understand it from the scratch, from the bottom up. Once we understand it, we have developed a competency model for that and the 360 assessment. Then we can apply that, very well in the development of leadership. So to summarize, it's practical. We do a lot of coaching in this process. It's not only like faculty coaching, it's not only peer coaching or action learning coaching, but we do a lot of coaching and development, making sure that the concept that we are dealing with gets integrated and know how to be applied back in the workplace.
Okay, Dr. Mohammed, the final word from you.
Yes, I just wanted to add is that one of the added values in our program is that usually in other programs you will find that every course would be an independent story, independent experience for the student. However, in our program, we're trying to integrate all of these course experiences so that at least the student can answer one question. To what extent, for example, what you've taken in marketing or in finance helps him or helps her in her let's say, career plan, in her vision, in her life goals, so that she will reflect on these different courses, not only once, but throughout the whole program, and try to build one grand story of her, let's say, career path based on these different building blocks from the different courses. And through the, let's say, the assistance of the coach, we'll have many different coaching questions to support the students throughout the whole program.
Right. Thank you for that, Dr. Mohammed. Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of our hour and a half. Time flies when you're having fun. Final word from you, each one, that you would like to leave us as far as leadership development and leadership in the UAE is concerned. Can I ask one of you to start?
Sure. I would just say that irrespective, always be aware whether you're just going to work on your strengths or also on your gaps. I think always keep learning, be aware of the different styles that are around you, how certain aspects of other people's leadership style might get different, maybe more effective results than your own. And if you do recognize these things, take them and keep them within your authentic style, which is why you need to understand what are your values, what's the culture you create, how are you as a leader. Never forget the self-awareness, never stop looking at people around you, and do the best you can for the people that you're leading or managing, or both within the organization.
I think you mentioned a very important word, authenticity. You need to be authentic. You will be caught out if you're a fake.
Absolutely.
I think my final word, I just want to say again that everyone can, as I said earlier, I second Dr. Mohammed, everyone is able to become a leader, independently from the context, independently from the culture, independently from any circumstances. I think once you believe deeply in an idea or in a cause, I think will become naturally, a natural leader. I mean, the skills will come out, and because you fight for something and you would like to achieve something. So yes, this is my final word.
Vali?
Yeah, I think, I think we must work hard on gaining that credibility that Charmaine talked about. We mustn't be branded as theoretical. I think the work that we need to do needs to be relevant to what organizations are trying to achieve. We need to understand that need very well. And then I have a plea, is that we need to create industry collaboration, where the industry will benefit from our research, but we will also have access to industry so that we can do our research, And I just want to end with the last saying, Kurt Lewin was famous for saying there's nothing as practical as a good theory, So where does good theory comes from? It comes from industry. It comes from working in industry. And that is my plea, is that we become relevant and that we work with industry. Thank you.
Charmaine has invited us to go to ADNOC. Thank you, Charmaine. Dr.
Welcome
Mohammed.
anytime.
My last word would be, I would encourage any potential students just to check the website of the university, the college, and the program, and you will find it very interesting. It will be especially the leadership program that goes aligned with all different courses. I believe that it is an added value, and it can create different, let's say, turning points. Any student who will join this program, at the end of the program, will be aware more about the turning points that happened to him or happened to her throughout the whole program, and they will be more self-aware in their influence among their colleagues and also among their subordinates.
Thank you, Dr. Mohammed. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your inputs, for sharing your insights, your knowledge, your experience. It has been very enlightening listening to you. I'm in your debt, the university is in your debt. And also to those of you who have registered and listened, thank you for your interest. And hopefully we will see each other again on our STEPS forum for more talks which the next one will be on the 27th of February, where we will be looking at the impact of the metaverse on the financial services industry. Once again, thank you so much. All the best.